Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
The NWA heavyweight champion, and at the time you had to be able to go 60 as a babyface or a heel as a champion. And this guy had been around, and he was polite with everybody, but I wasn't intimidated. I didn't think I was good enough to even talk to him. But when that'd be like you're breaking in baseball and you're playing baseball with Babe Ruth, and you don't want to talk to Babe Ruth because you don't feel you're worthy of him. And that's the way I felt, was because I knew I was the shits, and I never thought I would stay in the business as long as I did here, of just talking shit and doing whatever.
Drew Wilson knows how to keep us on live here. Hey, Rip, how you liking this 80-degree weather? It's $10 super chat.
This is the greatest weather we've had here today.
Opinions on Monty and the Pharaoh.
Oh yeah, I watch them on the internet a lot of times. They're really good. I like them. They have some great guests on there. I like their opinions. As a matter of fact, they're over with me. I watch them as much as I can, just as much as I watch Jimmy Cornette stuff, and that's probably the main two that I like. But then again, I like James. I like to watch James's stuff, and then God, I see the guy. I've been on his show, but I can't. The dark-haired guy, this and that. But anyway,
I've never heard of Monty and the Pharaoh.
Yeah, they're good. You can Google.
They wrestling?
Yeah, it's all about wrestling stuff.
Oh.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monty the Pharaoh, not in studio again, Jimmy, but you're at a Wahoo Saloon, and we got iconic wrestling figure John Nord, the Berserker. I just like to call him John Nord. If you don't mind us calling you John Nord.
I like anything you guys want to do.
By the way, John, did you know that our own Jimmy Pharaoh here is married to the widowed wife of Wahoo McDaniel? He met her on the show. What do you think of that?
Really? Isn't that one? That's awesome. I mean that. That's awesome. And I forgot her first name.
Did you have any experiences with the great Wahoo McDaniel?
I just love me and Kurt used to imitate him as a kid. But we would talk about him, but we would imitate superstar Billy Graham. And Billy Graham used to say, Wahoo McDaniel, this, that, and ever, and call him, Wahoo. But yeah, I did. The last time I seen Wahoo was at Chi-Chi's Bar on 494 in Bloomington. We went out drinking, and we were in these steel patio chairs. They were in the grass. And Wahoo got so hammered, he fell over backwards, and the steel things went into the grass. This sounds like us, don't it? All of us. I think, but I could see him doing that to this day, and he was a great guy. I mean, unbelievable guy. I love him.
His reputation obviously perceived. I've never heard anything bad about this man.
You know why? Because he was a guy's guy. He was a hard ass, but he was kind. If that's the right word. I don't know if that's the right. but he was
Is
a
the
good dude.
is the art of that type of wrestler somewhat lost in today's landscape? Not to jump the gun here, but
100%. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because it was like being out in the wild west, you know. And if you didn't like it, I'm the booker, or if I'm getting a little too stiff with you in the ring, so what, dude? This ain't like Steve Williams used to say. Hey man, this ain't ballet. You know.
Where does Wahoo rank in your influences? Because after all, you were a bit of a big bruiser yourself, my friend.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Wahoo was old when I ran into him, the little that I did, and in the AWA, and that was it. I never ran into him anywhere else, but I, of course, I heard about him since I was a kid. So he was. I just respected him because I knew he was elderly, and he was a shit. He played in the NFL. He was my type of guy, you know. I wanted to be a pro football player my whole life, and I was telling Eric that I got in a year with the New Jersey Generals, which was the USFL in 1983. And so I that's as highest I could get because I was good enough to hang on, but I wasn't good. But Wahoo actually, shit, I want to say there was a football card of it, you know.
Right. Many. Yeah, many.
Yeah.
And don't sneeze at the Generals, Mike. After all, isn't that where Herschel Walker began his
Yeah.
his tear?
Listen, you know what? That league doesn't get enough credit,
It
and John,
doesn't.
you don't give yourself
It
enough
doesn't.
credit either. You
No.
made it onto a pro league.
Yeah, and
Uh,
thanks for saying that, you guys. And I'll tell
It's
you
true.
why I agree with you, because the USFL, I always try to brag about it because it's just in my blood. And it wasn't about me. It was about, there were some kick-ass players. You guys remember Keith Millard?
Mm-hmm.
yes,
I remember
yeah.
that name.
I mean, he was a badass. He was with Jacksonville. All the number one draft choices. Do the math, right?
Oh, didn't Jim Kelly come from the USFL? Unless I missed something.
Jim Kelly, Steve Young.
Steve Young.
Um,
Case closed. Case closed.
Steve,
And to further hammer it home, look, I understand it's not the ABA, the way the ABA had,
yeah.
the Dr. J and stuff, but you know something? The names we're throwing around here, major, this is not minor names, Mike. On top
Well,
of it, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the current president the former owner of the Generals? Wait a second.
Let
Mike,
me
let's
ask.
go.
Let me ask John a
I'll
quick
tell you.
question. Let me ask John a quick question, and John, you
Yeah.
can say what you're going to say. I'm assuming your true love was football. So were you disappointed that you ended up not being in the NFL and wrestling was just the next step because you didn't make it as an NFL player?
No, it wasn't that type of deal, but that's a good question. It wasn't that type of deal because even in college, I knew I could squeeze in maybe, but I wasn't ever going to be a star. I didn't have the foot speed. And as an old lineman, there was guys like Anthony Munoz. Yeah, Irv Eatman was a big guy in the USFL, and I followed old linemen, but I didn't ever get. I always knew in my heart of hearts I wasn't going to be a star, and actually I was kind of a scared young kid. My eyes were this big, and Herschel Walker. Oh God! Hang on, John. One thing I was going to tell you guys, the one thing that you do was whatever the one thing you could do good, that's what I could do. Like I was a guy I think I had the second best bench press in the country. And who was the first? Steve Williams. And I think I did 505 or 510, but the main point being was I forgot.
Live TV.
I couldn't run fast. So I knew if I could bench a lot, I might get guys looking at me.
Right. Right. Was the grind on your body, like we've always gotten on this show the answer I'm expecting almost, but what was harder on your body? Professional football playing or professional wrestling? At the end of the day, which one hurt worse?
At the end of the day, I would say football, but the end of
Oh,
5 years, wrestling, you know,
okay.
in the long run, pro wrestling, because it was what your employer demanded was insane, you know.
Right. So what makes you get into wrestling? We'll start at the beginning, the path. How did you get into wrestling? Was it different from what you expected when you first got in?
Um, th- yeah, of course it was. I didn't know about kayfabe and Carney and all that. So, but I went to Brad Rankin's wrestling school, and it was October '84. But you got to remember now, I had Kurt Hennig that I knew since I was a kid. He was kind of paving the way. And then, of course, you got Mike Hagstrand, Rick Rude, um, Barry Darsow, and all these guys were in for me. So I got to say, I had such a strong in that I got maybe babied a little bit as far as being getting in. So
What do you take from the early days as far as how you applied it the rest of your career? How crucial was it to come in and have some of those names around you that you just mentioned?
uh, what was the question though?
Or what were those early days? How did you apply that in the rest of your career? How important were those early days to you? Because after all, the names you just gave us are pretty big names, Rude,
Yeah.
etc.
Oh, and we're probably too proud of it. Guys get sick of hearing about Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and the Minnesota guys. But we took it as we loved each other so much growing up, and we never quit, even when we got old. That how much we just stared at each other and went, "God, I love you, you son of a bitch! I love you." And it was that type in, but them guys like Kurt. One thing about I brag about Kurt is you gotta remember I watched Kurt get the shit beat out of him ruthlessly. He was a sandy haired, skinny, flabby titted guy. And of course we were in junior high together too, and senior high and all that. So the main thing is I went, God dang, Henning is you're just hanging in there, and then he blossomed and
Oh,
he cruised by everybody.
did he ever?
And yeah, so it's just a lot of fun having them guys since you're a kid. You even were an amazement yourself. We used to sit there in the locker room with Vince and go, "Do you believe it? We're all here together." And I mean, we were very close always. I mean, I'd go over to Mike Hagstrand's house. Rude would be over at my house. And me and Kurt got stealing beer once together. And I was over at Kurt's house and I was telling Eric that we got caught stealing, but the cops hadn't gotten a hold of us yet. And Kurt could run faster than me. So we got home to Henning's house. And we broke in this beer house and stole beer.
Okay.
We finally got home to Kurt's house, his little 3-bedroom Rambler that had 6 kids in it. And Larry had gotten called, his dad, by the cops.
Okay.
And we didn't know it. And we just come, "Ugh." I'm like, Kurt comes in. We knew Larry was pissed because Kurt was on a long streak of getting in trouble. And so was I. And we knew something was up. And Larry got so pissed that Kurt kind of skirted around him and Larry took and threw him down the basement stairs. But it wasn't like an abuse deal. It wasn't in that sense. And I'm standing there going like this, and Larry turns to me and he goes, "John, leave. And I go,
You
yes,
better.
sir.
Yeah, you better.
And I left. But the big thing with Kurt was when I brought that story up, he'd always say, where do you think I got that whirly twirl bump from?
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
He,
funny.
he applied it to his craft. You know,
Yeah, and that sound, I hope that didn't sound like it was it was
no,
just,
not at all. Not
we
at
were
all.
smart ass teenagers to
Yeah.
the max.
Yeah, I assumed you guys were I was going to ask how old you are, but I was thinking to myself as you're telling the story, these are a couple of snot-nosed teenagers.
That's exactly 15, 16. I don't even think
Oh,
we
I
had a
got it.
car.
I got it. Not only
Yeah.
did he take it easy on Kurt, Kurt turns around and applies it to his craft. What a genius. Oh my God.
Oh.
You know,
And most people don't realize that Kurt Hennig played junior college football for 1 year.
Mhm.
And he was a year ahead of me. So I actually went and watched him out of high school, 77. And Kurt played for Normandale Community College. And they had some great players at these junior colleges. I mean, like almost as good as a lot of Division One. It was incredible. So I watched Kurt. I sat there and watched him. He had 15 solo tackles in one game. That's no bullshit. And then on the next week in the paper was Hatchet Henning tackled North Hennepin.
Mm.
So Hatchet Henning.
John, it's not an easy question to ask, but considering your relationship with Kurt, look,
Yeah.
just to the wrestling fans alone, and we're only fans, we didn't know him, but his early passing just hits every wrestling fan who has any love for this sport right in the gut. What was your feelings when he passed away, if I can ask you?
So true. So true. You nailed it. You nailed it. Everybody, most guys that we grew up with were standing there. And I remember looking in the casket, and Kurt had gotten, you know, how you blow. And we were all just almost, you know, I think I know one guy got sick and threw up, Pat Johnson. He's a buddy of ours. But anyways, it was so hard. It was incredible. It's still hard to this day. I mean, you got Hagstrand died in October 03. Kurt died in what, 01? No, Hagstrand died in 04. No, Mike died in 03. No, I know where I was and what I was doing. I was in the workhouse
Hey, John,
when Mike
John.
died. But good call.
John, do me a favor. Tell Eric Shims to shut the fuck up, all right?
Eric Sims, shut the
I
fuck
bet
up.
he heard you. I'm sure he heard you the first time. Boy.
Anyways, and then we had a buddy, Brady Boone, die. And then, and I know we're talking about the deaths and all that, but it's so prevalent that if we didn't, we wouldn't even give honor to them guys.
Right.
And Mike Hagstrand had a heart as big as you could ever imagine. He was the greatest guy in the world. So was Kurt, and Rick Rude was our wide receiver, you know.
Right.
John, can I ask you about Rick Rude again?
Yeah.
We've heard so many different rumors of his passing. Did you ever find out what legitimately happened there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. His wife talked to, because that's the first thing I said. Like, what? But then it had to do all you have to hear, it has to do with cocaine. Same thing, Kurt. And I don't know how it got in your blood. I don't even want to know. But that's what it was, because that's the shit. I was right up to the table doing this shit on, but I think Rick got addicted where he did it at home, you know, and that was the demon. Yeah. When you start doing the shit at home. But Rick, what what a talent and he's a dead loyal, great guy. One time, I just had a guy from our high school tell me that he met Rude down in Tampa Bay one year, and Rick pulled up and he was crying. And he says, what's going on? He goes, I was just thinking about all the way I act and what I do sometimes. And here, don't sound like Rick, but that's Rick. He had that side of him.
Why do you think that wrestling, me and Jimmy call it a microcosm of the real world, but it seems like there's so many different, for being such a close knit group, especially when you were wrestling. I mean, it's changed a bit now.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
do you think that so many odd problems have happened, like Buck Zumhoff,
Yeah.
Nancy Argentina? Let's just talk recently. I know the Dark Side of the Ring's a big thing. I know
Yeah.
you've wrestled him a few times. Billy Jack Haynes.
Yeah.
What is going on? Is it? Can you explain why these things happen? These deaths and these murders and whatever.
Ain't it crazy, you guys? I would say I would have to be the good Lord himself, and only the Lord could answer that, because what else could it be except some kind of demon, spiritual warfare? I don't know what else it could be.
Is it comparative to the rock and roll business as far as the traveling circus scenario that you have to live? Look, if you're going to be successful in pro wrestling, or if you're going to be successful as a touring musician, you have to live that life. So is there some sort of connection? Is there some sort of, because it's like a traveling circus kind of deal?
It
brings craziness.
could be like that, but I'll tell you why I don't think of it a lot like that, because rock and roll guys party maybe like we do, but they don't have that camaraderie that we have, and they don't have,
That's true.
like, I got to do the match tomorrow, and I got to be a certain amount of tough guy and learn to take these bumps.
Oh, physically, no, of course not.
And getting, and I know you didn't mean nothing by it.
Right.
I'm just saying that was the differences. And the camaraderie, I believe there's a few guys of rock and roll that are close to each other, but not like,
the
not
bondage
once
is
you,
incomparable. Right. The bondage of a pro wrestler in the pro wrestling family is incomparable compared to. I completely
So,
get that.
that's what all,
Yeah.
that's all I
completely
meant.
get
And that's where my mind goes to. And I can tell you this, I always say this, and maybe this ain't kosher, but I'd say if I would want one guy in court to lie for me, it would be it'd be another pro wrestler, because he's the guy that would do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the whole thing would get put over. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you'd go, "Don't let me down, brother." You would
Absolutely.
You would not even have to say that. You just have to stare at him and go, "Got it."
That's
Hell,
it.
yep, I got it.
How did you navigate the waters of WWF when you were there during those golden days? There's a lot of stuff going on there. How do you navigate the waters with the politics behind the scenes and the drugs, and what was that like? It had to be way different than AWA days, my lord.
It was way different. You're right. You're right, and I would say because your wife was getting your paychecks in the mailbox every 2 weeks from Titan Sports, that kept you hanging on. But you also had guys looking out for you, but somehow the night before, we were all up to the hotel room table, misbehaving, and here we are, made it to the next night. But there was no cameras, there was no internet, all we knew was we had to be at that locker room, at 6 the next day. And you know, when I remember once I won the Battle Royale. Sure enough, I'm out all night. I barely get to the locker room, and they say you're going over in the battle royale. I'm like, of all nights to do it, that's what you just told me. I'm thinking,
Yeah, and then you turn out to be like Doc Ellis pitching a no-hitter on acid. Oh, well.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
And
the way.
the main thing is you just had guys looking out for you, but it was mainly, I'd be lying if I said everybody was. It's almost like the Florida guys looked out for them guys. The
Okay,
Minnesota guys looked out for these guys.
right.
The East guys looked out for them. And
Had
then a
groups.
little scattered.
Yeah, you had
But,
groups. Okay.
and
How do we get to the Berserker character? There's one thing for sure about the Berserker character. It's very memorable. It also happens to be Mike's dad's one of his favorite characters ever, right, Mike?
you're just
He
saying.
was. No, he was.
He was.
My father enjoyed the Huss. I
Yeah.
remember when I was he used to love it. But let me ask you go on that, Jimmy. Was that Vincent McMahon's idea of bringing in his own Bruiser Brody?
No, and I'll tell you why. I was on my dad's car lot selling cars, and I think we watched the Tyson fight together in late 90 or 90. And I was with Barry, Kurt, Rude, Hegson, and all these guys were in. And I almost started crying because these guys are in and I chose to sell cars. Well, anyways, they bring me in because I think Kurt said something. But it was deal. Remember the movie, The Suburban Commando? Wasn't
Yes.
that how?
That was Hogan's
So-
movie, yeah. By the way, before you continue on with this, before you continue on to the story, I have to ask you, since you brought it up, is Hulk Hogan one of the great actors of all time?
You idiot.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, the guy should get an Oscar.
Oh,
He
no.
can't find it. Are you kidding me?
Oh.
When you watch him, it's even worse. So
Oh,
nothing
thank you.
personal, officer. But
Thank you.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm glad you said it. We had to get
Yeah.
it out there.
You had to
Yeah.
get it out there. You
He's
had
not
to.
Clint-
Anyway,
he's
they
not
flew
Clint
me out
Eastwood.
there,
Next.
and the Undertaker, who I had known already for 4 years, he's out there trying out for the part for this movie. And then I'm trying out against him. Well, who's going to get the heel part? Good-looking guy like me, or the red-haired, sick-looking son like him?
Uh-oh.
Of course, he got the part. He came down from this director named Burt Kennedy, and he had directed John Wayne films. So he came down and he says, "They told me I got the part." I said, "I knew it, you son. You got." Anyway, so I flew to Vince. They brought me in the office and says, "I think we'll make you the Viking." And I did 3 matches or something as the Viking. They come in and says, "The Viking has been trademarked." Some kid trademarked it. And the kid, the kid was actually wrestling in Japan. So then Vince goes, "Well, I think we'll make you the Berserker because that's a form of the worst Viking." I said, "We're going to say no, So
Right.
was it my favorite name? No, but Vince said, let's go with it. And I did my best.
You didn't hiss at him when he came up with the name? I mean,
What do you mean? Was I said,
actually,
yeah.
Actually, Huss.
Yeah, me and Brody did the Huss, but
Yeah.
me and Frank talked to each other about like, now you want to go with me on what I do? I said, yeah, I'll do that, Frank. Let's do it. So I kind of did that. Now, obviously, everybody knows about Brody, and he's a legend. And yeah, I'm definitely no Frank Goodish.
were you frustrated at the character, the Berserker, like the way it was presented? Was there ever any? Did you ever get to talk to Vince about things you might have wanted done with the character? Was there any discussions along those lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, but I will say no, I didn't, because was there in my head? Yeah, I'm like, well, this ain't my favorite deal. I mean, people think I'm an idiot and this and that, but who cares? I'm here for the party. Really?
And the money, right?
Of course. Of course.
So you brought up
Mike,
Vince. You brought up Vince McMahon. What are your thoughts about these accusations?
Ooh.
The most recent accusations against Vince McMahon, and
I'm
what do
not,
you think about Vince McMahon, the person?
yeah, can't see it happening. I stick up for Vince a lot because I'll tell you what, all these guys that tend to talk smack about him sometimes, they would never have a job without him. He's been good to a lot of people. And how can you dig on a guy too bad? But what this last thing, are you guys talking about what I think you're talking about?
We're talking about the sexual allegations, the
poop
Janelle
deal.
Grant, yeah, and
Yeah.
the poop on the head, that type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah,
The poop. Yeah,
And-
the poop.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I'm actually disgusted by him, and I'll tell you, and of course a lot of people are, but you don't. I mean, Brock Lesnar, Vince McMahon, big story. Can shit get that weird? Yeah, we think we all know it could get that weird, but I just don't buy it, and I have a hard time. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, John, let me ask you this then: when you engage in a relationship with another human being, right,
Yeah.
and they take payment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
let's be realistic. Vince McMahon is a billionaire, and
Yeah.
usually, I think it's 70 something years old. Not many 30 or 34-year-old women who are somewhat attractive, unless you have a lot of money, are coming that way, right? We all know this.
Yeah,
We're all
that's a
three-
good point.
We're all three older guys, right?
You know,
So-
that's a good point, and that's the kind of shit I forget.
well, yeah, well, we all think that we're still that, but we're not. But my point is, when a woman or a man, whatever, you take
Yeah.
money for a service,
Yeah.
do you think you lose all credibility after that point, no matter what the story is and whether it's true or not, right? Because you have taken money for said,
Yeah,
you know?
kind of. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one to say not yes to, because what are you doing giving this nutty broad anything if that was the case? And I know what you're saying, and I guess I agree. I just, we have a hard time fathoming when you got that much money, don't you got better things to do? I mean, yeah, I guess we can all get a little weird, but I just have a hard time seeing it,
Fair enough.
But I'll tell you one thing that because I know Brock Lesnar, and Brock is a hard ass and all that, but he was so damn good. He's so good for pro wrestling. He's off the chart, and he is, when you know him. I don't know Brock really good. My son wrestled with him, and at the U of M and this and that. And I've talked to Brock a few times, sold him cars. But here's the point with him is, I see him laughing and getting silly like the rest of us, but I don't see him diving in that deep. And I believe what he tells me, and believe me, I talk a lot of smack on these podcasts. I said some shit where I got in trouble with my buddies. So, yeah, no, but it sucks that Vince had to pay anything.
John,
did pay anything.
How were you able to process as someone who's putting his body on the line, and you get to the big WWF and they give you this gimmick? I want to go back to Brody
Yeah.
You knowing Brody, why was the trigger never pulled where Bruiser Brody in his prime should have been fighting Hulk Hogan at a WrestleMania, and then further down the line, why were the two of you not made a tag team? There could have been so much more potential for you too. So why do you think that it never happened with Brody and Vince, and ultimately it could have been more for you? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well said. That's. But I'll tell you why. First of all, Frank, you remember he was making 14,000 a week in Japan,
Oof.
and that's
Okay.
when 14 was like
Oh,
25 now.
it's nice
But
now. I'll take it. Go on.
yeah, well, off the chart. So money is so crazy; it's hard to add up anything. But
Right.
I know this: Frank loved Japan. He just liked it. And I met him in '85 over there, back when him and Snuka walked off the train and didn't take their payday. And they just left all their money there. And then Japan delivered both of them a suitcase of their payout, which would have been, 30 grand, 40, 50 grand cash. And Frank liked Japan that much. And then he loved the single outlaw stuff. Love all the small shows that he got a lot of $1,000 payoffs, We'd go to St. Louis, and I wasn't there for most of his because he had a long career before I ever ran into,
Right.
years. So why just it wasn't that Vince didn't have that strong a hold on the wrestler's mind. He used to have it on the public, but not on the wrestlers. And Frank was one of them. He just went off. Maybe next year. And then me and Frank talked. They offered us 250 grand each for 100 plus nights. And Frank, I called Frank at home and I said, that's a firm no, right? Yeah, nah, not yet. And then here he dies 3 months later, and I'm sure something else could have been in Frank's head if he stayed alive longer,
What were your thoughts on his murder in Puerto Rico, and why do you think justice was never served?
100%, because they're tied in with the mob and the judge. 100%. Yeah, remember, here's they got an 8x10 photo and said, "This is the man that tried killing me. I had to defend myself." And they bought it hook, line, and sinker. But it was so obviously a murder that it was crazy. Yeah. And I was with the Nasty Boys at a bar in Minnetonka, Minnesota, when we got the phone call at the bar that Frank had been murdered. And we're all like, and I was with Knobs and Sag, and it was one of them bars out on the lake. And and everything got quiet the rest of the night. And we talked and somehow hoping it was going to be not true.
I don't know, man. John, I don't know how you deal with all these friends that you've lost. They're like your own like you said, they're your own family, right? From Hawk to Kurt to I mean, the emotional letdown. Do you
Yeah.
again, this can be a tough question for you, but do you think all this devastation and tragedy led you down a road where, I guess it's public knowledge that, you've had your own demons, especially with
7
alcohol.
DUIs.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Listen, I'll talk.
really?
I don't mind talking about this
Okay.
stuff.
Okay.
No, thanks for being courteous, but don't worry about it. Listen, I remember the only wife I ever had was I love my wife dearly. I feel like I had got the best girl in Robbinsdale, and she had come to me and she just said, John, I wasn't in jail when I find out about Hawk dying. I said that. I didn't mean that. I landed up in the workhouse the next day or in county jail because I got a DUI. But my wife came up to me and she said, Mike Hakestrand is dead now. You're going to be next. And it just, and then I got divorced. But yeah, it was. And it's the guys you grow up with were really stabs. Yeah. And you couldn't have been a better guy. That's what really hurt. Yeah. But me, yeah, I got addicted. I loved drinking, but drinking I could turn on and off. And then you get into the bowl and I could turn that on and off. But then I got on the pain pills and the benzos, and I couldn't turn that on. That stayed on. And I fought it, and I still fight it.
Now that
And
you
you
can
know,
look,
you should-
now that you can look at it from a much more mature, rational perspective, which you've clearly just expressed, how much of it, if you could ratio it, is the business involved in getting wrestlers down these sorts of roads, as Mike was exploring with you earlier? How responsible in a math quotient is it? 65-35, your own accountability? Is it the other way around? What would you say it is?
Well, if you scratch off that you don't want to take any blame on yourself, just pretend that don't exist. And I would say it's 90% that you're in pro wrestling, because talk to my buddy Brad Rangans a lot. Talk to Brad almost every day, and we get into these conversations and we start just going, man, the business was so different. It was like no cameras, no radios. I'm just gone out of the house. We just had a great match. We just earned a couple grand each. What are you going to do? Go back up to your hotel room, read the good book, which I tried doing, or you're going to go down to the bar and do shots with Ric Flair. I always chose the second one.
Yeah, I'll go with Ric Flair.
And, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Considering you're saying all this, and now as we've all advanced in age,
Yeah.
I'll tell you personally, and please feel free to disagree. I've got a problem when a wrestler like yourself, who's made tons of money being a wrestler and entertaining so many fans, when something goes bad, that they have these GoFundMe pages, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? I mean, on a personal level, I'm not a big fan of it, right? I think the fans have done their goodwill and they've been entertained and they've paid good money out of their own pocket. At what point do you stop taking advantage of a fan?
I'd be a bullshitter if I said I disagreed. Because, listen, I got a bad leg now, and I almost lost my leg. Well, here's what happened for me. And this kid that helps me out on the social internet, Justin, and he helped me out. I didn't even want to turn on a phone or a computer, and I never really have, but I have been the last few years. Anyways, he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna start a GoFundMe." I said, "Oh, what is that again?" Well, go ahead. And I think I got given about $6,000 for medical bills on mine. And I can say that because I agree with you guys. Looking back, I go, God, that's cheesy, man. It's cheesy and it's come on, let's call bullshit. Now all of a sudden you're on GoFundMe. I don't like it. And although I did it, honest, yeah, I don't like it. I enhanced it, but I don't know. That's how many. When does it stop that the fans did their duty? They love you. They paid their tickets, and now you need, you know. So I agree with you.
A lot of the Vince McMahon haters love to squawk on the internet that the WWE, as a whole over the years hasn't done enough to support talent who were struggling mentally, physically, financially. What would you say about Vince McMahon's efforts to? I mean, we had Scott Hall on, and he told us he was sent to like 7 or 8 rehabs on Vince McMahon's coin. Is Vince McMahon an uncaring bastard, as his haters would say, or what say you?
No, he's not. He's not an uncaring guy at all. He don't show a lot of emotions. He's kind of really good job. But no, he's not. And I'll tell you what, I just had another grandchild, and my ex-wife says, I'm going to give Katie, I talk to her only about once a year. And she says, I'm going to give Katie, my daughter, this gold teething ring. I says, when did you buy a gold teething ring? I said, she said, no, Vince McMahon sent it to us when Elizabeth was born. That was 92. Here he said, I says, oh, what's something like that worth? Because that's the first question he asked.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't even know she had. She said, well, I remember when but it's like $2,600. They just sent that out of the goodness. So there's Vince McMahon. That's the Vince McMahon I know.
There you go.
But then on the other hand, Vince knew I was never out to get him. But he did know that I was a little bit of a fuck up, like, yeah, not a little bit. Let's say a lot of a fuck up.
Listen, I'm gonna take a hard right turn on this one, so I got to get this in. We just had Holly Atkinson, or Von Erich for wrestling fans, on the show. You worked WCCW, and we all know the Iron Claw came out. Did you see the Iron Claw at all, John?
I never seen that movie. What do you guys think?
I learned to like it a lot but again, I'm a Von Erich guy. Like, being a WWE guy, me and Jimmy grew up. Something about that area was always impressive, and I was always just a big Kerry Von Erich fan. Can you share a story about Kerry Von Erich?
Oh, Kerry. Yeah, Kerry. Oh, I don't know. Right away you think of the goofy ones and that, but Kerry was just one of the kindest, hardest guys I know. But he was like me when I'm on Xanax or I'm on Ambien and I'm going, yeah, man. Aren't we supposed to go to Cleveland? John, you're in Los Angeles. What the fuck are you talking about? That's Kerry. Because I am like Kerry in some things, I can tell you what it is. But I'll tell you this. Here's something weird. It's, I don't know, was it 91 or 92? But here Kerry's here. I didn't know the guy had one leg. And then I was rooming with Davey Smith. And now we got a third guy because they're out of rooms, and it was Kerry. And what was crazy was I heard this boom, boom in the middle of the night, and I'm going, that's when I found out, because I never asked. I heard, and Kerry would never shower, never in a million years, with one leg. Is that what I call it? Should I say this or not?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
I love.
he showered with his boot on, from what we heard. Again,
Yeah, and most of the time he didn't even shower. He just kind of skid that. But I do
Wait
the
a minute,
same
John.
thing,
Are you
Terry.
trying to say Kerry Von Erich was stinky?
Apparently the ladies didn't care about the soap, Mike.
Oh my God, was he was, and you know who was a big Kerry Von Erich fan was Kurt Hennig. See, Kurt Hennig looking up to Kerry Von Erich, and he's going,
Right.
"What a freaking athlete!"
Yeah.
You know, and everybody loved him. Everybody loved Kerry. If you turn your nose up at him, then I feel sorry for you. But I could never do it. Oh, I could laugh and say, "God, I'm just like you, Kerry. I'm a mess."
The film did a good job, just from my take of the film. The film did a good job, since you haven't seen it, of the brothers.
Isn't that great?
The brothers' relationship with each other was done very well. Some of the
Oh, that's cool.
some of the physical casting was a bit of a head scratcher. Mike, you want to explain the Von Erich size dimensional differences in the
Well,
casting?
again, Kerry Von Erich was as close to Arnold Schwarzenegger as you get.
Yeah.
Me and Jimmy were talking about this a couple of shows ago.
Good way to say it.
Hellwig was a big, huge guy, right? The Ultimate Warrior. But Kerry was bigger than Hellwig, and he was more built than Hellwig.
He was.
And
Yep.
they had to have a famous star in there, and it was Zac Efron, who put himself in great shape as Kevin.
Did
But
he?
you can't put a huge guy in there, so they put like a very small guy as Kerry Von Erich, because Zac Efron is not a big guy, so they had to mix and match there. You know what I mean?
Do you think they dropped the ball on that then?
I do, physically.
I think that the story in itself about
Ric
that
Flair was the
family.
worst. Sorry, Mike.
But the thing is, the story about that family is more than enough. You don't need wrestling, right? You
Agreed.
can have a little wrestling in it. The story between all the devastation and the highs and lows of that family, you could have told one of the most fantastic stories of all time. And
You
I felt
said it
like
perfect.
thank
You
you.
couldn't have had a script better. You didn't need wrestling.
Right.
That's right. That is right, John. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And the rest-
I couldn't agree more. And I just have never talked about it much, but like when Mike died, I was there that night down in he went down to some lake and died in a sleeping bag, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Was that true? I never talk about this stuff, so I gotta ask you guys on this one. And then Kevin was always good to me. And then I was telling guys earlier today that the only thing that hurt me was, and I'm a Von Erich fan too. Not like you guys, but I am, because I love them and respect, and they were good people, man. They are good people. But
How did Fritz treat you, John?
he treated me great. He says, when Brody was booking, and I remember I wrestled Kevin in Texas Stadium, and after the match, Fritz came up to me, John, I just want you to know that's one of the finest matches I've ever seen. And he was kind of talking to me. And I just quit. I said, I just quit coming to WCW or Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I just quit coming. And Frank quit the same time, but I just quit coming. So, but Fritz sent me a $600 check for that. And that one hurt. But I'll tell you what, I quit anyways. So here in me, Brody, I thought Frank was mad at me because I quit going. I just quit coming. And he thought I was mad at him for getting jacked on the pay. But the pay wasn't because of them. It was because I chose to just not show.
What does the Berserker think when he looks at today's product compared to his day?
Well, what do you mean?
How much has wrestling changed when you take a look at it today in comparative to the days where you were cutting your teeth? And then,
Yeah.
what do you think when you
It's
see
one,
today's wrestling product?
it's crazy. It's one giant high spot. Just we're gonna do this, stupid, the one, two, boom, 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 boom. There's no more, and I don't understand it. I wish I did. But there was the day when you guys know that Dusty Rhodes or Ray Stevens could take a guy over in a headlock and sit there for 7 minutes waiting for the crowd. And it was here's the biggest difference that all the wrestlers I think will agree on this. We were doing it. You had no contact with the other guy. You had to do it 4 or 5 nights a week. And the only thing you knew was the finish. But you had no idea what was going to happen in the match because you couldn't talk to the guy. He was coming in there and you were coming in here and nobody had a cell phone. And that's how you learned your trade is by, we got to figure this out when we step in the ring. And now it's total opposite.
Mike, I find that amazing because basically, only knowing the finish, you would think that the injury rate would have been much higher than today's choreographed, planned, laid out dances.
It's a good point, Jim. It's a good point, Jimmy. But to
amazing.
be fair to today's wrestler, right? John
Well, the high
knows
spots
as well
are
as
obviously
but
insane.
John knows as well as anybody else, right? When he played football,
Yeah.
and as the football player or the basketball player or the baseball player advance, they're becoming, again, different nutrition, different ways of doing things. The athletes are getting stronger and better by the day. And when I mean better, I'm not saying the wrestling's better, okay? But the point is, I think the athlete is stronger. I think, John, that's a fair statement, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Without question. There's so much more personal trainerized, not that they got a personal trainer, but they probably do. But it's nothing wrong with them. That's okay. That those guys, they're trying to be the best they can be. And we get that.
There certainly wasn't a Brock Lesnar specimen running around on the East Coast in WWF in 1970, whatever. So
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
no shit is,
no
and not a Kurt
I get
Hennig, not an animal, not
This
a
is
hawk,
true.
not a berserker. I mean, let's
right.
Hey,
Well-
John, I want to move this 1 second. We're going to go back to this because I want to get this in. It's Phil DeCesare, who we call the president of the channel. He was part of Boston Wrestling, and he wanted me to reach out to you and say, him and Charlie Wilson say hello. I guess a few times you've been on Dan Marotti. You've been on a lot.
Bless Dan Maratti's soul. Loved pro wrestling as much as any guy. He was a walking computer. And
I love it.
Yeah, I would. You tell them guys hi. I remember both them very clearly, and it was a gas. I cranked it up with Dan. They would, I'd just say off the wall stuff like, "Oh, that's too bad. You had a little problem in that town, huh? I heard you had to get the hell out of that town, huh?" And then there was that, what you were doing with that girl. I'd just say anything, and he fed into it beautiful.
I got to tell you, you were crazy when you were on that show. I was like, holy cow. But let me ask you this. Here's an interesting thing, and this is a problem that me and Jimmy have. Does it bother you, especially being an old school guy, that fans like Jimmy and myself are have an inside track just being on a podcast or using wrestling terminology? Does that bother you? I know it bothers some wrestlers that they feel that fans should not have an inside track. And be honest, John, it's okay. We're not going to get
I know what you mean. That was a surprising question you just gave me. And I don't think I've ever been asked it, but
hey, this ain't Hannibal, John. Let's get real. We're talking good shit here, bro.
I would say it touches me in certain spots where I kind of blush a little bit and I go, but I try to, then you just put your ego down and you move on. But I would say I agree that it does kind of hit you. That
Can you elaborate
kind of
more? Like, why does it hit you? Like, elaborate. What's your feeling inside?
because we were so when I broke in '84, Bert Henning would come up to me and go, "Norm, you don't tell secrets of our trade. You stay on the bars that the heels and baby faces don't ever get together. Brother, that's bad for our business, brother. And you won't have a job." And he was serious. Kurt was like, "Yeah, Kurt is serious. Okay, I'm in. I'm in, brother." And the Carney talk and all that, I'm in. And you got to totally submit to that. That's why I was so I'm in, and I'll stick with you guys, and I'll stick by the rules of our trade till the day I die. That type of thinking. And that was what I believed. Once that gets in you, it's hard to get it out.
Were you
You know?
were you angry the night of the curtain call, which is kind of like a watermark for when kayfabe took a dive when the clique is
Eddie
all in the
Mansfield?
cage at Madison Square Garden and they're hugging. It's like what the were you angry about that when it
Well,
happened?
let me add on to because he just mentioned about Eddie Mansfield too. What did
I
you
thought
Oh
that's what
yeah.
you were
think
going to
about it?
say.
Well, which is fine. You could use both those examples, John.
Right. Well, the click was an explosion. Once that happened, because internet was starting to come into form and stuff, that's when every fan started using the terms that you're talking about, Mike. But go on.
Right. Now, I don't know what you were going to say about Madison Square Garden. I don't even know what you're going to say. But I'll
Well,
go first, and I'll tell you my only thought was Eddie Mansfield went on 2020,
correct.
and there was guys in the hotel room sitting in front of the TV going, "I heard he's going to do it. He's going to do it." Everybody was dialed in. Nobody had cell phones. And we're
Right.
going,
Correct.
"Did you hear what he just did?" And we're on the road. We're on the side of the road, taking a leak, stopping the other wrestlers and going, "Did you hear what Eddie Mansfield did?" No, that's Eddie's first name, right? Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what freaked all of us up. And I remember, I think the guy who was maddest the most, and I know I've talked about Kurt a lot, but I'm just telling you, he was pissed beyond belief. And I'm like, "Well, take it easy, Kurt. We'll get by this. Don't get so emotional, But it's because he cared about it and he wasn't going to give in. And Kurt was, but now would Kurt all of a sudden just talk to one of the baby faces in the bar or the heels in some bar in County Road 10? Hell yes,
Mm-hmm.
he would. So
Right. Right. And that's what made the curtain call at Madison Square Garden so shocking to wrestling fans because they were in public now. It's the early 90s. They were in public now where the faces and the heels are hugging after a match. And and at this point we do have internet. Internet is starting and guys like Dave Meltzer with their wrestling
yeah,
rags are coming into form and
yeah,
that's where it completely took off and kayfabe basically took a fall.
it is, ain't it?
Yeah.
I heard about that. I still don't know about that. This, what do you call it, curtain?
Yeah,
Curtain
it's called
call.
the curtain call, and it involved the click, like the Scott Halls and the Shawn Michaels and the
Yeah.
big names in the business. And Vince is looking from the gorilla position in the back, and he sees his faces and his heels hugging. Very interesting.
Oh, that one hurts, don't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
very interesting.
that
John,
hurts. Yeah,
John, real quick question. You mentioned some of your closest friends, Rick Rude,
yeah,
Hawk, and
yep,
again, we're just fans, but you hear some of these guys were a bit bullies, right? In some cases, you
yeah,
guys are big guys, bullies. But
yeah,
I'm going to ask you about Mr. Fuji. Mr. Fuji has a reputation of being maybe one of the worst ribbers and almost a bully type of ribber.
I
Can you
agree
share
with
any thoughts on Mr. Fuji, please?
Yeah, I agree with you. I love Fuji. Here was the deal with when they gave Fuji as my manager. I was kind of disappointed, but Fuji ain't my style. Fuji had, I'm actually a very tender-hearted guy, and Fuji just got so hard on the road. And of course, we've all ribbed each other. I won't even get into that. But the hardness of his heart is what freaked me out a little bit. And I'm sure it got softened when he got older. But that's what freaked me out about Fuji. And I never liked, but it freaked me out about Frank Goodish when Frank got too serious. But Frank, not that it's the same thing. I know we're talking River versus Bully, but now I know you guys told me like, John, cut the shit. Frank was a bully. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's hard for me, not, it's just a sucky subject to talk about.
So now that you're veering towards that, and this is a very difficult question. We talked
Yeah.
about Frank earlier, and Jimmy brought
Yeah.
up a great question about his murder. This is a very hard question to ask, and I'm not saying this
Yeah.
is my opinion, but do you think Frank brought that on himself, the way he was treating promoters and the way he was doing business?
Yeah, but it's such a bad example of that because here you are in Puerto Rico with a guy that it was such a. I want to say that because I brought shit upon myself. All you guys have brought stuff on yourselves. I brought stuff on myself. I think guys can say, listen, I kept picking on people in high school, and finally I ran into the guy at the party when I was graduated the next month, and I ran into a guy from another school, and he just pummeled me. It's kind of like that, ain't it?
Kind of like someone's finally cashing your check, right? You finally push someone far enough, right? They're going to cash your check on you one day.
Yeah, I've seen, I heard like Lance Von Erich. I ran into him, and he was on some podcast saying that Brody had me hurt him. Then I ran into Lance in Portland, and Lance Von Erich goes, I ain't seen him since 1987, Lance. And he came up to me in Portland. I didn't know who he was. He had a beard. And he stared at me and goes, you ended my career. I said, who are you? Lance Von Erich. You ended my career. This is a true story. I said, Lance, how you doing? Good to see you. He ain't shaking my hand. He says, you ended my career. And Frank asked you to do it. I said, Lance, if you're being serious, you couldn't be more wrong. That is not how I would ever think, do, or say, or anything. That was just an accident in the ring, and I don't remember it happened. So where I was going with that is, I'm not proud of how a couple things I did where I got too stiff, except that I deserved to get my ass kicked. And maybe I did, but I'm not proud of that. And here's a guy giving me his body. He's being light with me, but now all of a sudden I think it's my entitlement to start really kicking him in the head as hard as I could. That sucks. And that's wrong of me. It's wrong of Frank Goodish. It's wrong of anybody. But I was always in this fathom of we got to keep it stiff, you guys. We got to keep it, from from people thinking we're pussy.
John, do you think that, look, Frank obviously walked to the beat of his own drum and dealt with promoters consistently over the years his way. Do you think that this was a case in Puerto Rico of him holding his ground, and unfortunately he held his ground against some very evil people this time?
Yeah. Evil forces were at work. And you talk about getting too far into it. And Jose Gonzalez got too far into it. And he really thought he was entitled enough to take and stab a guy. And that's just nothing less than insanity. You know.
Agreed.
But yeah,
Agreed.
Frank, it's you know, if Barbara's wife was listening to this, I don't think she would hear anything she hasn't heard. But I know this, Frank always preached, brother, take care of your family, brother, you know, this and that. He was Barbara used to tell me Frank's a free spirit, you know, and I'm a Jesus Christ guy. And I used to kind of say, well, God, Frank, you believe in God? And he'd switch the subject and go, brother, you ever go in them head shops and get the skull? And that's not my style, but it was Frank's style. And I don't know what was in his heart of hearts, but I know this, that it was so sad that you don't understand. And I always blame it on, I mean, what else can we blame it on except evil workings, you know? Unseen, too.
John, we want to respect your time, so I got one last question. Then we're going to hit you something called the Pharaoh's final question, and we'll let you get some rest before your appearance tomorrow, which fans will be excited for. But I wanted to ask you your opinion on, you know, especially with today's wrestling fan, Hulk Hogan's one of the guys that people just love to beat up on. And he's still paying his debt for some racial comments he said, you know, quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
How is Hulk Hogan towards you as a human being? And do you feel, as you know, someone who wrestled around Hogan, is he a racist?
Absolutely not. He's too kind-hearted. But good God, who would be, you know, when you talk about racism, who would ever say they haven't looked at another person with another skin and made a judgment in their head? Of course we all have. So if that's the question, Hulk Hogan is definitely not a racist. And he was just a guy that had to control this runaway horse he was on. And yeah, I mean, really, selfishness can come in and all that. And I know once I went up to him in the locker room. I says, "Hey, Hulkster," we used to get $200 draw a night. I said, "Hey, Hulkster, think I could borrow $1,000 tonight? I'm all out of money. I've been burning." He reached his pocket. He slapped $1,000 in my hand and he said, "Here, take it. I got too much of it."
Wow.
I just wanted to tell that story.
It's a great story, John.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, we're going to hit you something we call the Pharaoh's final question. John, before you cut off air, you got to give me one huss, please, because that, you know, that's the most important part. But the Pharaoh's final question, Jimmy. Now, John, he may ask you what color underwear you're wearing. I don't know. That's unscripted. Yeah. We never know. Right?
If you can get the weirdest you've ever got, listen.
There you go, Jimmy.
Oh, he wants the weirdest. All right, fine. Daphne or Velma from Scooby-Doo? You wanted weird.
Well, let me close with this.
Are you hissing at them?
even as a young man,
Hussing?
6 years old in front of the TV,
Oh no! Here we go.
I would think, I wonder what color bush he's got.
Rocky, right?
You know,
Am I right?
you know what, John? That is an honest answer, and I really appreciate it because I thought the same thing. So did Jimmy, and so did everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
Well, and I'll also close with a Kurt Hennig thing. I'll try to lighten this up, but it's short. We've been staring at girls with tight jeans on, and sometimes they're pulled too high up. Is that bad? That's
No,
bad.
Not at all. Not at all.
Too high up.
Not bad.
And Kurt would go, and there's a place in Minnesota called Mound, Minnesota. It's where the Gagnes are from. And Kurt would look at the girl and go, John, look. I said, what? He'd go, Barbara Bush from Mound, Minnesota. That's Kurt Hennig.
That's Kurt Hennig.
Sick. Forgive me.
Good stuff, John. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Jimmy.
Thanks. Hey, Monty and the Pharaoh. Thank you guys. You guys are good dudes. A lot of fun.
Thank
Please
you.
have me again.
We will,
Yes,
and
sir.
you're a good man, and we're wishing you great luck tomorrow, especially spending the day with Eric Sims, which, by the way,
Mike.
you should get some kind of combat pay for that, John. So,
Mike, can he at least?
No shit. And
Can
guess
he at
what?
least-
I got to expose a backstory about him. Did you know that me and him used to run guns in Ethiopia?
What?
Really? I did not know
It's the
that.
Israeli Jiu-Jitsu, Mike. It's coming back now.
We were
It
gun
is.
runners. And
There
Sim
we-
checked it up.
Can you at least huss at Eric for us, at least?
Yeah. Well, let's just do one and get this shit over with.
There it is. There it is.
I just woke up half the hotel.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And by the way,
Monty
Eric,
and Pharaoh, I love you guys.
we love
Oh,
you too, man. Jimmy,
Thank
send us
you.
out, big guy.
Had a ball.
You've been
Thanks.
watching Monty and the Pharaoh with the Berserker. And we've been going berserk. And until next week, later.
Later.